Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to have you all here today. I'm Kesha Rogers. I see we have some new faces in the audience, and I am a leader of the LaRouche Policy Committee. And also, for those who don't know, I have recently announced my campaign for independent, or running as an independent for the U.S. House of Representatives for District 9, which is currently Congressman Al Green's district. So we can talk more about that campaign throughout the course of discussion. But I think what's urgent right now and what the topic and title of this discussion is going to be that myself and my colleague Joel DeJean, which you'll hear from later, are really going to focus on is a restored national mission, a recovery program for the United States. And this restored national mission is absolutely urgent to be brought about in a timely manner. We're looking at now less than 45 days to President Trump's State of the Union address. President Trump is going to be given a State of the Union to the joint session of Congress on January 30th. And what we're witnessing and have been seeing for several decades now in terms of a breakdown crisis of the physical economy in our nation is only going to be addressed by an urgent mobilization for a national recovery program and for a restored national mission. And that is the responsibility that uniquely falls on President Trump and also falls on the American people to demand that the urgently needed solutions and actions are put in place. And this is why I've launched the campaign to run for U.S. Congress, because we need more people pushing this quality of leadership at a time where you see a total disintegration of our financial system and the economy overall. So in the next 45 days, we have to make sure, let's go ahead and we can go to the next slide. So in the next 45 days, we have to implement the needed program and solutions that President Trump must understand and must actually enact now, despite any opposition whatsoever. He has to provide the leadership. He has to say that we are moving with a national recovery program to save lives and to protect the people of this nation. And today I wanted to show, this is the next economic recovery report that the LaRouche organization has been working on. It is now at the printer. It will be out for publication and circulation sometime this next week. The title of the report is LaRouche's Core Laws, the Physical Economic Principles for the Recovery of the United States, America's Future on the New Silk Road. And there can be no hesitation in the address of President Trump. Whatever he thinks is important to discuss right now, the urgency that has come up in terms of what we recognize going back to the 2007 to 2008 collapse. That this system, it is already ready to blow. It is already disintegrating. And there was just a report that was sent out just to give you a sense of how quickly we're at that point of breakdown and no return, and why these solutions are urgently needed. There was an article that was released in the London Daily Telegraph by economist Ambrose Evans Pritchard, and it was titled, "Everything Bubble is About to Burst," and that was from December 14th. In that article, he says, "We will learn in 2018 just how much tolerance there is for an aggressive Federal Reserve and dollars squeeze. He discusses the rise in the debt ratio that is risen from 276% to now about 320% of the GDP. And you also have the U.S. at about 295% of the GDP as the debt ratio has risen. Now, what he also made clear is that the tax cut legislation that has now been introduced by the Congress, particularly by the Republican Party in Congress, is disastrously timed. He said inflation is already rising, the dollar is falling significantly, and reports have it that the Federal Reserve is going to raise discount rates 4 more times over the course of 2018, and declares that this will burst the everything bubble. Now, my assessment is that the everything bubble should be burst and is already ready to burst, because we have a bubble in a financial system and an economy that has been based completely on speculation and a collapse of the physical productive needs of the population, of the real economy. And this must immediately be replaced by an economic recovery plan that saves lives and puts the productive standards and increases in the living standards of the population first. So, next slide, please. So there you have it. These are the laid out concrete solutions that have been put forth by Lyndon LaRouche in his 4 laws for a real economic recovery program in the United States. And I think that it is imperative that the educational process of the American people be escalated to understand fully the urgent implications of these laws, that we demand from our U.S. leaders, congressional leaders, and others, that the well-being, the livelihood, and the economic productivity of the people have to come first. And you can read these laws. I'm going to take a specific point to integrate what it is that has to be understood about them, not as separate pieces of legislation. Because what we're not talking about is, well, let's see how many votes we can get in Congress to get Glass-Steagall passed. And then once we get through that loophole, let's see how many votes we can get to get a national banking recovery program. This has to be sort of as a musical composition that's working together in concert with one another, that focuses at the highest level on a commitment to increasing the productivity of the people and the creative output of the people of the United States. And I think the very key element of Mr. LaRouche's 4 laws, as he describes it, is really implemented first and foremost in his discussion of the purpose of a federal credit system. He states, the purpose of the use of federal credit system is to generate high productivity trends in improvement of employment, which with the accompanying intention to increase the physical economic productivity and standard of living of the persons and households of the United States. I'll say that again. The purpose of a federal credit system. You know, this is completely different than what this whole operation around a tax program is right now that's coming up. The federal credit system and its purpose to generate high productivity trends in improvements of employment, with intention, the company intention, to increase the physical economic productivity and standards of living of the persons and households of the United States. Now, ask yourself, When is the last time that we have had that commitment in the United States? I mean, it's been a long, long time. So now, if you want to look at, just go to the next slide, please. I think you have to understand, in order to actually have that commitment, you have to understand what the basis of real economy and a commitment to the increasing the living standards of the population require, and what an understanding that that is the start of that has to start with the basis that we put human beings, human life first. And I just want to put these two diagrams that I put together up here, because I think what we're talking about is we're not just talking about giving people makeshift work and more jobs here. We're talking about stopping the death rate, increasing the living standard and the longevity of the people of this nation, and really to ending the poverty that has been rapidly increasing. Now, people have seen in our recent publications and reports, we've been talking about the breakdown crisis, not from a standpoint of a monetary standard, but in terms of living standards of the population. And this should really give you a sense of what we're up against right now. There was just a recently released report on the increase of homelessness in the United States, and this is focusing on children. So you think about it, if right now the report that just came out from the Legislative Budget Board, and these are figures from 2016, so this is prior to Hurricane Harvey, that you have the figures are indicating, this is from May 2016, in the Houston region itself, just to bring this home a little bit, because if you look at it from the standpoint of national breakdown, and now right here in Houston, the rate of homeless students is the highest in Houston, Texas. Of looking at it from the standpoint of Texas, and it's at 26,497 homeless students. Now, if you look at that in comparison to the next highest rate of homelessness in Texas, the next city is Richardson, Texas, up near Dallas, and it's estimated to be about 14,797. That's almost double right here in Houston what you have in Dallas, and then it goes on from there. Fort Worth is about 11,674, and San Antonio is 11,015. Now, how do we allow that to happen? How do we allow for a system that would, we're just talking about the students here. We're not talking about their parents. We're not talking, and we're talking about prior to the devastating national disaster of the natural disasters of the Hurricane Harvey, which still has, I think it's an estimated close to 40-something thousand people living outside of their homes and hotel rooms. So those people are probably not even included in this estimate, which obviously was done several months or almost a year and a half before. Now, you also, go to the next one, it was just recently filed, and people may have heard about this. This is the NPR interview or news update. We put this out. Harris County sues pharmaceutical company doctors for opioid epidemic. And we know that there has been a serious drug overdose opioid prescription epidemic in the United States. Um, Many of you may not know how much it hits very close to home here. And now the Attorney General, the Harris County Attorney Vince Ryan has filed a lawsuit on these hospitals and doctors and others prescribing opioids. Now, what it's showing is that the prescribing rates in the county have been, the Harris County I'm speaking of, have been historically above average. The prescription rates are 79.4 prescriptions per 100 persons. And you have more than, look at it, there's been more than 33,000 opioid-related deaths in the United States in 2015. That was 2015. Definitely increased through today in 2017. You also have had, of that, 2,588 in Texas. And in Harris County, right here where we are, right here where Congressman Al Green, who is more concerned about calling for impeachment based on no validity whatsoever, is not addressing. Harris County, there is 318 deaths. That was due to opioid prescription overdoses. And that's about 12.3% of the population of Harris County. So
12.3% of that.
yes, 12.3% of the deaths of the population in Harris County, 318. So what does this tell you? I mean, our responsibility right now is that we have to stop this rate of increase of death, of breakdown in the population. The rate of increase that we need is to increase the rate of increase in the productive standards of the population. And so I think this is where the question of what a real national mission actually characterizes. And just recently, the President of the United States, President Trump, announced that he, back up and go back to the national. Okay, so President of the United States announced that the United States would be returning to a mission for taking astronauts back to the moon and onto Mars. And this is an important directive here. And he says that he signed a Space Policy Directive 1 and called for a change in the national space policy that provides for a U.S.-led integrated program, private sector partners for a human return to the moon, followed by a mission to Mars and beyond. In signing that statement, he says, "The directive I am signing today will refocus America's space program on human exploration and discovery," said President Trump. "It marks the first step in returning American astronauts to the moon for the first time since 1972 for long-term exploration and use. This time, we will not only plant a flag and leave our footprint, we will establish a foundation for an eventual mission to Mars and perhaps someday to many worlds beyond." Well, that's a very optimistic vision, very important. But I do have to say that when President Kennedy set the objective and the vision for sending human beings, sending our astronauts to the moon, as he called for landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth before the end of the decade. That was not done with the intention, nor was it accomplished by just going up and planting a flag and leaving footprints. That was a product of what became one of the greatest economic recovery programs of our nation. And this was following the recovery program of President Franklin Roosevelt, which actually set forth and marshaled in the necessary economic infrastructure platform for actually bringing about the arsenal of democracy and reforming and revamping our entire productive economy. And so what John F. Kennedy did, and what is essential for understanding today, is that he led a decisive vision for a true recovery program, and what had to be marshaled in by the greatest scientific and economic progress of the nation for that vision that he laid out to be accomplished. And so, but what is it that Kennedy truly understood? I think it's imperative that we can take an example of leadership from President John F. Kennedy. And this is a real challenge to President Trump right now. That Kennedy's understanding of an economic recovery program had nothing to do with tax cuts and bailing out Wall Street, or had nothing to do with monetary standards. He called for his program to land a man on the moon. His program for an economic recovery program was to increase the scientific and technological investment and the economic and true economic expansion. And you can see that I would encourage people to go back to read President Kennedy's January 29, 1961 State of the Union address, his own. And I'm not going to read the address per se, but I want to point out something very significant. In that address, he talks about the state of the economy and the rate of breakdown that our economy was in at that time, talking about the homeless rate, the lack of productive education. He was talking about how many classrooms are overfilled with teachers without the resources to teach, the rate of collapse in our energy system, our water infrastructure system, and the collapse of our medical system. And then he declares the solution, quote, to meet this array of challenges, to fulfill the role we cannot avoid on the world scene, we must re-examine and revisit our whole arsenal of tools, military, economic, and political. Under President Kennedy, the arsenal of tools became a specific proposal for a recovery program that actually was met by certain proposals, certain implementation of what became a investment tax credit program. This is what President Kennedy did to bring credit to businesses that were going to invest skilled labor and actually invest in the productive economy of the United States, and who were absolutely essential for seeing through this mission that he had laid out. You know, you were going to have the greatest minds, the greatest skills, technology, so forth, put forth. He also called for in terms of increasing the work standards of the population. He also put forth called for investments in the water infrastructure and energy infrastructure and the medical care programs in the United States. Those, particularly on the medical care, he was very clear that a standard as embodied by former previous President Franklin Roosevelt had to be key, that you put a Gilbertan standard of increasing the hospitals, the doctors, and all of this is increased through your technological and scientific output in terms of making sure that lives and not budgetary policies came first. Now, as the most important aspect of this, let's go on to the most important aspect of this policy and program that was put forth by President John F. Kennedy is his understanding of the process of what drives our economy. And this is very much in tune with what the basis of Lyndon LaRouche's 4 laws really centered around. It is human beings, the increasing of the educational and the creative standards of human beings. And I wanted to just put this up here first to make the point that as Kennedy laid out a very clear vision that inspired so many people in his call for for the landing of a man on the moon, for his space initiative. He said that at the time he made this address and calling for such a national mission and orientation to be accomplished, he said that this decision demands a major national commitment of scientific and technical manpower, material and facilities, and the possibility of the diversion from other important activities where they are already thinly spread. It means a degree of dedication, organization, and discipline which have not always characterized our research and development efforts. Now, in order to accomplish this goal, Kennedy knew that the education of the population was first and foremost. And I think this is very important, as he says, our progress as a nation can be no swifter than our progress in education. The human mind is our fundamental resource. A balanced federal program must go well beyond incentives for investment in plant and equipment. It must equally include measures to invest in human beings, both in their basic education and training in their more advanced preparation for professional work. This is absolutely critical because if you're talking about meeting the challenges and the standards laid out in Lyndon LaRouche's 4 laws, without human creative input into this process of restoring the productive standards of the population, we're not just talking about creating makeshift work. You know, this is where what Lyndon LaRouche states in his 4 laws as the height of the idea and center of what the role of a real increase in the productive standards of the population has to start with an understanding of the role of man and the nature of man in this measurement. And he states in his program, which very much highlights exactly what was the success of President Kennedy's mission and why he was a target, because he put human beings first, where the Wall Street speculators says that we have to create a zero growth rate in the population, if you wanted to have an increased growth rate of the population, this had to be your measurement of success for development. And LaRouche goes further in his Core Laws and Economic Recovery Program as he says, man's progress as measured rather simply as a species is expressed typically in the rising power of the principle of human life over the abilities of animal life generally, and relatively absolute superiority over the powers of non-living processes achieved within mankind's willful intervention that intended effect. Now, break that down. Human beings are not animals. We have the ability to change and to transform the conditions in which mankind lives willfully. Animals cannot do it willfully. A beautiful article by Abraham Lincoln where he talks about the beavers build and do just as their beaver fathers and grandfathers and family before. And they cannot willfully change the way that they relate to the environment and the economy around them. You know, animals are not creative. And animals cannot willfully increase their productive standards. They can't willfully make a creative discovery and share it on for generations and generations to come with other animal family members, with animal grandbabies and great grandbabies. But human beings can. And so if you think about that from the standpoint that, one second. If you think about that from the standpoint that it is absolutely imperative that we understand what the idea embedded in a national space program and as a mission orientation could really mean for a total breakout in the relationship of freeing mankind from the rapid increases in homelessness, in drug abuse, in answering all of the economic challenges that we face in our country right now, and to understand what a real recovery program means in the United States. So as I transition into what Joel is going to take up in terms of the question of what is a real science driver program for the economy, for increasing the productive standards of the population. And this gets to the fourth law of Lyndon LaRouche's Core Laws as the fusion energy driver, the fusion economy. And this is where we have to see a commitment to a fully organized national mission orientation. As you cannot have a driver or a real scientific driver by having piecemeal different types of science programs going on. If you're talking about a fusion, a national science driver mission orientation, you have to think about it in a way that was very much developed during the Apollo program of President John F. Kennedy, that it has to be a science driver that is going to shape and increase the entire economic program and development of your country. This is why, as Mr. LaRouche states, the next fusion economy is the presently urgent next step and standard of man's gains of power within the solar system and later beyond. And I think as he states that, that's absolutely important to understand in contrast to the difference in thinking about the fusion economy based on a grabbing of resources or trying to get over on trying to speculate or make money. But it really sets the standard of a increasing the power of mankind in the solar system. If we actually have that idea in mind, then you're not going to allow for children to go hungry or to starve or to have rapid rates of increase in your poverty levels in your population, because the idea is that you are going to increase the ability for mankind to solve any problem that it faces. And I think one of the things that I've had a chance to read recently, the Apollo astronaut and geologist Dr. Harrison Smith, wrote a book back in 2004, 2005, where he talked about a program for return to the moon. And in that, the book is called Exploration, Enterprise, and Energy in the Human Settlement of Space, Return to the Moon. And he talks about what a specific output for what a fusion driver would actually entail by discussing the role of a very important resource on the moon called helium-3. And many people may have heard of this. As this year we celebrate the 45th anniversary of the last human landing on the moon in 1972, December of 1972, the Harrison Smith and his crew were one of the only crews that brought back a substantial amount of lunar samples. And out of these lunar samples, we were really able to make certain scientific breakthroughs and discoveries about the role of this very abundant resource on the moon and unique substance, which actually, as Harrison Smith says in his book, that a return to the moon consists of an access to low-cost lunar helium-3 fusion power. And helium-3 fusion power represents an environmentally benign means of helping to meet an anticipated eightfold or higher increase in energy demand by 2050. Not available in other than research qualities on Earth, this light isotope of ordinary helium reaches the moon as a component of the solar wind, along with hydrogen, helium-4, carbon, and nitrogen, many other resources available on the moon. Embedded continuously in the lunar dust over almost 4 billion years, concentrations have reached levels that can legitimately be considered of economic interest. Right about that. They are considered of economic interest because it's going to be the interest of every single human being on the planet working together, the United States joining together in concert with this energy driver, this science driver program, to actually address the needs and the challenges facing mankind on the planet. And as we go further into what it is that has to be understood about this national mission orientation, this science driver program, I think right now we have a wide open potential. And as Joel will continue to lay out, this has to be the mission orientation right now for where we're going as a nation, and the standard that we set right now for a return to the moon has to mean a full recovery program for the United States, has to mean answering the challenges of the of the that we face as a species, as a nation, and this has to be done above and beyond any call for saving the financial interests of the United States over the of the nation, over the interests of the people. So let me leave my remarks at that, and then move to Joel for continuing discussion.
First off, say the Apollo program is what inspired me to study science. I remember watching Neil Armstrong take the first steps on the moon when I was 10, during a family vacation. Now, Kesha and I and Peter Bowen recently attended a series of conferences on the space program. And the first one was on the history of the Voyager spacecraft. Voyager spacecraft, which were launched in 1977 and proceeded to visit the large planets, the Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus. And we also went to a meeting celebrating the 45th anniversary of Jack Smith's in the Apollo 17 landing on the moon, where Jack Smith was the speaker. And Kesha and I got to ask him a question on the helium field. And it was surprising his answer. Last year we attended a conference where it talked about his motivation, but he was concentrating mostly on the geology of the various disciplines, which was interesting. But this time when we brought up helium-3, he really lit up and went into about a 15-minute answer on the benefits of helium-3 and fusion. He even threw in an attack on Jimmy Carter for canceling reprocessing of nuclear waste, which can be reprocessed for additional fuel. Now, the third meeting we attended was with the National Technical Director for NASA. He came in from Washington, and he went through some of the latest technologies that NASA is working on. And the evident problem was if you have piecemeal projects and no national mission, then these projects are not going to go anywhere. Now, if you think back in 1972, and some of you were alive, you had the beginning of the Voyager program, because it took from 1972 to 77 design and build and then launch the Voyager 2. Now, in 1972, I also started a high school at the Bronx High School of Science. And I came from the Bronx. And I lost my Bronx accent since I've been in Texas. And so you have from 72, you had these end of the Apollo project, the beginning of the Voyager, But outside of the space shuttle, nothing else was actually launched in that period to continue the Apollo project. So if we look at what President Trump announced is excellent. And by the way, during that announcement, if you listen to the video, you hear Trump reference Jack Smith. And Harrison Smith was part of the audience in the Oval Office for that announcement by Trump. So if Trump is actually going to succeed in getting Americans back to the moon and eventually preparing a project to get to Mars, he's going to have to adopt the fourth of LaRouche's laws, which encompasses all the others. Because if you look at what it's going to take to get to Mars, we will never get there with a manned mission if it's just using chemical rockets. The speed of the mission will mean that the passengers, the astronauts, by the time they get to Mars, will be in no condition to do any exploration. I won't even survive the trip. And if you look at the fight for resources here on Earth, without fusion power, we will descend into a situation where what goes on in the Middle East will be going on, not only in the Middle East, but will probably lead to the use of fusion, but not as an energy source, but as a thermonuclear weapon, which is the danger that we're watching into right now. So you look at the fourth law that LaRouche laid out. Now, back in the mid-'70s, LaRouche and his associates started what became known as the Fusion Energy Foundation, which at its height had a magazine with a circulation of over 100,000. Now, we were in contact with some of the top leading fusion scientists, not only in the United States, but in the Soviet Union, in Europe, in Japan. And that foundation was bankrupted by Robert Mueller and his friends. And in the mid-'80s, 1986. And from that point on, we basically have had no real science drive in the United States. Now, in 1989, H.W. Bush, Papa Bush, in 1989, on the 20th anniversary of the moon landing, announced a mission to go back to the moon and go to Mars. Now, you remember what happened from that announcement? Zip, nada. Now, his son, you think his son would learn something. 20 years later, after the Columbia disaster, where the Columbia shuttle disintegrated, coming back to Earth, George W. Bush announced the Constellation program, which was a revived mission to go back to the moon and eventually Mars. And since the funding for that mission never materialized, by the time Obama came into office, he set up the mission, looked at what was developed, and said, well, we've already been there. We've already done that. Why do we need to go back? And we don't need that. So the space program was reduced to chasing an asteroid somewhere near the moon, which means that the program went nowhere. So now, with President Trump's announcement and his upcoming State of the Union speech, we have an opportunity to actually flesh out both the economic means to get back to the moon and also the science and technological means to get back to the moon. Now, instead of going through all the ins and outs of fusion, Kesha thought it'd be better if we had a back and forth discussion on questions that come up in this discussion of the fourth law and LaRouche's overall science program. So I think I'll I'll stop there and we can begin a discussion on what it's going to take to get back to the moon eventually.
Yeah, so they always say it's 30 years away to sell DeJean, and that's because they don't make the crash program like Kennedy had for the man in the moon, where he had the tax credit for the industry to develop and use it in other technology. So it doesn't have to be 30 years away like that.
Right. Well, I use the example. If you think about mankind's progress, and we had fire for thousands of years, and we developed a process of concentrating the fire to make charcoal. Again, thousands of years. Then we discovered this gooey stuff in the ground called oil. And if you were a farmer in West Texas in the 1850s, and you were drilling for water, and you hit this black goo of oil, you would think your farm had just been ruined. So it was a process of technological development that gave us internal combustion engine, gave us the way to use this newfound resource as a power source. But if you look at airplanes, how long has man been flying? Thousands of years. And if you look at what was necessary to get to man flying, you had to develop oil, you had to develop internal combustion engine. But it took individual bicycle mechanics to invent aeronautical engineering, to study the way birds stay in the air, the aerodynamics of bird flight, to figure out how to fly. Now, if you look at where we went from 1903, when the first flight was about 200 feet, about 12 seconds, from 1903 to 1969, so 66 years, we went flying a few hundred feet, flying 250,000 miles through the air. Now, that was done by conscious political decisions to develop aircraft, to develop space technology, and it took a presidential decision to state that we're going to land on the moon in less than 10 years to actually accomplish that. So if we look at that perspective, if we had a president that said we will achieve fusion in 10 years, I'm sure it could be done. Now, if you look at what the Chinese are doing, and I recently read a report on China's nuclear power program over the last 50 years, they are not only building nuclear power plants of the third generation, they're developing fourth generation high temperature gas cooled reactors, modular reactors. They're investing in fusion energy, and they're also looking at what we threw away about 30 years ago called cold fusion, or what's now known as low energy nuclear reaction. So if you look at the way China is developing their frontier technology, we should not only match them, we should join them. And if we collaborate with China, Russia, Europeans, the Japanese, and actually invest in the required technologies, because what the U.S. is spending on fusion research is $200 million a year. If we were to concentrate our efforts, we would be able to not only develop fusion, but develop second generation fusion so we can use helium-3. So next up, somebody says that, and says, well, you believe man will ever fly? And if think about it, right now we have 2 million people every day take flight around the world. If you think back 100 years ago, that was impossible to even believe.
I also have a comment on what Keith was saying earlier about education. I was in a classroom yesterday, what's called IPC, Integrated Physics and Chemistry.
What's the P for?
Physics.
Physics. Okay.
IPC.
Okay.
And it's a ninth grade course, basically. There were a bunch of juniors in there because they failed it's aimed at an introductory overview sort of science. And they were at the end of a classes doing presentations. And of course, I only had a chance to actually see 2 of the presentations for a variety of reasons. But the thing that struck me so strongly about them is that what they were talking about is energy transformation, which were assigned to figure out, like electrical energy from chemical energy or heat energy from electrical energy, and describe it, how it's used in society. And typical of the kind of question and answer that went on by the teacher and student was the student said, we use energy in our daily lives in the kitchen. We use electrical energy for cooking, and such things, right? And so the teacher said, well, how do we use the electricity? Flame the stove. Well, what cooks the food? Well, the electricity. And and she kept trying to provoke the student. And finally, she did get her to say, what cooks the food? Heat. Oh, electrical energy becomes heat energy. And she clearly had, actually 2 of them, no concept at all about what was going on in the relationship of various forms of energy. So they had failed, to learn. Now, all these kids are going to pass that course. They're all going to pass it.
What age?
This is freshman. It's a freshman course for high school.
Reproductive biology.
Okay, so
before the biology.
Yeah.
So 13. 14.
And the point being that our system is telling these kids it doesn't matter whether you learn or not. These kids should all fail. They should not be allowed to get a credit for something they haven't mastered, they don't know anything about. But we don't fail them because we want it to look good in the stats for the state. And the state doesn't particularly care because we're not interested in creating generations of scientists and engineers. We're interested in creating, automatons who will go out and do the work that's, they're told to do. So this is the kind of thing that Kennedy overcame by the space program, by creating an environment where the excitement about building the future was palpable. Everybody had it in their hands. They saw it on television. And but the state of our education right now is just pathetic. Now it's true; these kids, this was the lowest level, in the school. And it's not that they were low level or something like that. The problem was they were going to pass. Because these kids could all learn this stuff. These kids could all master it. They could all know it. But there's no interest in forcing them to know.
Yeah, there's no mission.
Yeah.
If you look at this push, I've observed recently this whole push for STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math.
Well, it's STEAM.
Yeah, if you throw arts in there, it's but science today is reduced to climate change. That's the only thing that's considered science today. But if you look at the reaction that people had to the landing of Curiosity back about 5.5 years ago, even these kids who have no real understanding of how their smartphone works, you know, how electricity works, that even kids who've been dumbed down over the last 40 years can look into space and be inspired. Now, you can imagine if we had a mission to go back to the moon and we had classes where kids would be taught, well, how do we get there the first time? What do we overcome? And how are we going to use new technologies that you get from Mars? You wouldn't have to have any STEM initiative to get kids to study science. Because young kids are naturally curious. And after they say why enough times, you get it out. Yeah, and you get them to fill out the bubbles of the test. But if you think about it, if kids in high school or even middle school were given the homework assignment of figuring out how Kepler developed this model of the solar system, it actually worked through the original works of Kepler, through astronomy, harmony of the worlds, then they would be in a position to lay the groundwork where they could study physics, biology, chemistry, and actually make something out of their lives. But they have to see a goal for the nation. And if there's no mission, it's not just making money. They're not going to be interested in science or technology.
Yeah, I want to add something to that. Just to say that just think about what this really optimistic perspective that was outlined. This is the key: is the restored optimism in the population. You think about what this movie "Failure is Not an Option," and Gene Kranz, and what was being shown about the developments that came out of the Apollo mission, and how these young people, that everybody who was working on the program, who was working in mission control, were, these engineers and scientists. All of them were under 30 years old. Most of them were in their 20s. But it was a commitment in the society to actually say, we're going to have a unified long-term national mission. And that's what we're missing today, because people are trying to they've been taught and conditioned to think, how do you make a quick dollar? Our perspective has to be on making money fast. Kids are ready to get over to the casino halls because they're saying, if I put a quarter in the slot machine, I can make more money faster than I can studying engineering and paying thousands of dollars for so many years and then coming out working at Starbucks. So what's the national? You got people with degrees right now who are working low-level jobs who should be a part of actually rebuilding the space program and commitment to a national economic and science driver. That's how you're going to get these young people inspired, because most of them are saying in the classrooms that you're just talking about, Pete, I'm just trying to get out of here because I need to go find something that's going to make me some money quick. And a lot of these people, based on what I was just showing, especially these young people, the rate of homelessness right now, if people are living in their tents in the front yard of their homes or in their houses themselves because they can't get assistance after a natural disaster, which granted was not necessarily a natural disaster all on its own, but was a criminal negligence, And these children, they can't have food to eat right now, and you want them to actually learn science. They don't give a damn about science. What they want to make sure that is that they can actually survive. But if you had a commitment that we're going to put you and your interest and your livelihood for these young people first, that we're going to take away all obstacles that will prevent you from learning, that's going to be the key. So I think that that's what we're dealing with right now, that, you know, there's no sense of optimism. There's no eagerness to learn because there is not a commitment that we're all in this together. We are going somewhere. We're going somewhere as a nation. And I think that's what we have to change.
Also, if you look at what some of these Starbucks workers are, they're also paying back college loans to the tune of $30,000 average per student. That's student loans are the average graduate or high college attendees paying back $30,000 in student loans. And if they're working at Starbucks, it's going to take a while. So maybe they can get a second job at McDonald's. But if you look at the 60s, there was not only the Apollo project, but I remember in New York State, the state invested in the State University of New York. They financed these public universities. And I remember the tuition I paid in the mid-70s was like $1,500 per semester. I could afford that by working part-time. So now these state universities are forced to run these alumni fundraisers to try to match the private schools, because instead of being funded 100% by the state of New York for television, they are being forced to recruit students from all over the world who pay full price. And the funding from the state is down to 20% of the cost. And if you think about it, a lot of the costs, if you look at even the Texas schools, which have the advantage of having oil savings, you know who the highest paid university is? And they've got a new one from Texas A&M. Right, and the new one for Texas A&M is going to be paid $6.7 million a year. And the presidents are now making, college presidents are now making $1 to $2 million. So that's what the tuition is going in for.
Well, it is ridiculous, but I think one thing you do have to understand about things is that it's like that $6 million salary. According to the athletic department, it's all being funded from outside. That is not being paid for with state money or tuition money. It's all coming from people who are sponsored.
That's only if they win.
Yeah.
If they start losing that money.
I realize is actually major differences. What were the racial demographics of the country? So maybe it's understandable why some talking to the population don't feel like there's a future or an investment, and then it's the slow dispossession of white people after they're founded by white people. And now they see the population dwindling, and it's no small wonder why maybe they don't perhaps feel as invested in the future. Well, you have to consider the fact that the average IQ of the nation is small. Coincidentally, the average IQ in the third world is rising. So what is the correlation? I think it's much easier to get the national mission when you have political power. Things like these are all great ideas. Everybody I've ever come across has great ideas. The problem is the power.
I have to differ with that because I came to this country when I was 6. 8, the poorest nation. All right, well, I'm just giving you an example that me and my brother and sister had not one word of English. And we didn't have French as a second language. And we learned in 3 months. So it's not the racial makeup or
So ethnic diversity causes an increase in social disharmony. So the more ethnically diverse or racially diverse or politically diverse or any sort of diversity you have, you're going to have conflict that's going to make it harder to have these sort of unifying pushes towards a unified goal.
no, you have to think
It
of.
doesn't have to be like that. It's true. But when we look at there's absolutely no other.
Well, I beg to differ because if you look at the United States is made up of not just
Very
Europeans.
diverse. And of course, a 10% less population.
But we have Asian Americans who are now occupying more.
Outperforming white Americans.
Right. It's not a matter of your skin color. Have you seen hidden figures?
I was thinking about some of the things he's bringing up. But, I used to teach diverse communities at U of H a little bit. And just like I can see Asians who are at the top of the list, whose parents were very courageous to come here, God knows kinds of sacrificing and to get on little boats sometimes, little things that, whatever. And, but you see, I've seen spoiled brat Chinese kids who are at the bottom of my class, who are playing with their cell phones and what have you. I've also seen like the things you put at the top. I mean, it's, I just think you have to be careful. It depends on the situation, like what brought them there, how easy it was for them to get there.
The problem is that the correlation with IQ and work ethic is absolutely zero.
Well, first off, you cannot study anything based on statistics. You have to understand physical problems.
That's not true at all.
What I've noticed is the biggest problem with what I've seen, not that
Well, you understand, you're saying more diversity, which is kind of strange.
more diversity creates more conflict. More diversity of thought is a good thing. More diversity, more just plain diversity for the sake of diversity creates conflict.
Houston is the most diverse city in the United States. You see conflict in
Has anybody taken a second to look at the political? Very stratified mind. So I guess the point of all this, what I'm saying, is that I like the the problem is how do we get to that?
Well, take the example of the Apollo project. If you haven't seen it, well, what were the skin color of mathematicians who worked inside it?
I have no idea, but I'm going to go ahead and assume 99.9%.
No, they were.
Right, that movie that we all saw.
Yeah, it wasn't just one. Katherine Johnson.
Accomplished these goals when they were.
All the medical clinic, wherever I go to, there is an astonishing number of
National.
Indian
Like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I was going to college in the 80s, early 80s, the emphasis was to make the young kids engineers. Now it has shifted to doctors. It's very sad that engineers are, their career span is 10 to 15 years. I have about 27 plus cousins out of the maximum engineers. But the cousins who do best are few babies, doctors. They're all my first cousins.
So now it's shifting to not medical science, but medical profession. They're not there to do research or anything. They just want to get their license, do their internship, and start practicing. Whereas, when we studied engineering in the mid-80s, me and all my fellow Indians, Pakistanis, and all my cousins, whoever did well, the idea was for him to pursue a master's degree and he going to do research. Today, our diaspora, Indian subcontinent, the kids are being pushed to study medicine and mechanics. Or study economics and go to Wall Street.
Check. That's the problem.
Indians are actually one of the ethnic groups that outperform white heritage.
Well, if you look at China,
I watched teachers and I graduated in I didn't do that well. I watched teachers for 5 years on the campus. I couldn't even work outside.
right.
Because we are sent here for a purpose. We don't have our home. But to become something. Become something. Yeah, eventually.
It's not just to make money. If you look at China, China is educating.
And along the way, make it a better place.
No, and people come here because it's America is really big piece of
Really big
America.
pie, really big piece of money.
Piece of pie.
Yeah, but who expanded the pie? Why is America the technological nation, at least it has been up to now? It's because of Alexander Hamilton, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King. He inspired.
It's a big thing.
Now, if you look now, the Chinese are training 2,000 fusion scientists. So maybe we're going to have to all learn Mandarin to wake up.
Well, I want to make a point here. Alex, exactly this kind of thinking about diversity and all that sort of stuff. This is what the imperial mind is made of. They want to create conflict based on these so-called differences by rejecting the idea that human beings are all potentially creative. They're all potentially human. And it's the nurture and development of that power to each individual that is the purpose of the state, is what Alexander Hamilton understood clearly if you read the work. So it's the yes, there are differences. Does that mean that a poor black boy can't become an Albert Einstein? Or does that mean that every rich white girl is going to become a researcher? No. But the idea is that if you have differences that are played upon, you get people to fight each other.
Right.
And that's what you see in Houston politics. That's what you see in national politics. But it's organized. See, the thing that I'm asking you to think about is that it's organized deliberately by the imperial outlook. And that's what the British have been good at for the last 200 or 400 years.
I think America is the greatest fertile ground. So the intelligence, there is no bigger fertile ground. America is basically, I think, the world society, and America is the greatest agricultural field, you might say, where you sow your idea, or you have the ability to develop your idea. Right. Like I said, you can go to any medical ratio around community and higher number of, high percentage of people from the subcontinent because they have the tenacity to spend 10 years before they start making money. It's not a question of IQ per se. They have the tenacity. They usually come from Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, I would say higher middle class background. So they can, they can spend the 10 years. Because it does take about 10 years to become a medical doctor, or at least 8 years. They have to go, even if they pass from India, they come here, then they have to do residency. So, America is the biggest fertile ground.
Yeah, that's been the case, but if we keep going the way we're going, there's going to be much of it.
Right now, I have to experience with PhD. He's a professor in Kansas, but he was saying that my kids, when they will start their career, they will have student loans. Not like the kind of money he makes. Because I cannot buy enough credit for them. But, like you said, you were paying $1,500 in the 80s. I was going to say, as an out-of-state guy, I was paying $100 per semester. But after a year, it went to $2,000 for foreigners and like us. Even that was affordable. My father sent from a third world country to pay my I could go somewhere. But that thing has really changed because it's discouraging a lot of young people. They're not seeing a future. We gotta go to college. We'll start our career with $100,000 a year.
Yeah, I mean, I think I appreciate what you're bringing up because I think it's important because I think it is the fact that I mean there is a real sense of pessimism. I mean, this is why we're having this discussion because what does it really take to have a renewed sense of optimism and a sense as Keith was bringing up that every single human being has a unique quality of creativity that doesn't look to skin color or your ethnic background or your economic condition, your socioeconomic status. And so this has been an intended divide and conquer strategy to actually say that you have to pit people against each other. I mean, they're trying to use right now this whole racial divide as a means for distracting the population from what needs to be done in terms of a real national mission orientation of unifying people around these solutions that we put out right now, that you have the President of the United States, the current President of the United States, has shown himself to actually be very much in favor of these types of policies that we put forward. I mean, he has been the first president in a very long time who said that who has actually called support for Black people making organizations, who has referenced at any point a commitment for a return to the, but more importantly, a commitment for providing the economic standards of Hamiltonian American system standards. But what do you have right now? Dominating the thinking process of the population. It's pure breakdown.
Conflict of interest.
Exactly.
I'm not saying that I think that like the group or whatever, just like what is the root strategy of the country? That's what sort of
Eurasian land
it seems
bridge.
like to me, like
Yes.
what the strategy is, a lot of pushback saying that that's bad. I don't feel it.
Well, the strategy is figuring out how it is in countries like China.
99% ethnically homogenous, all contact.
Yeah, but they were that way 50 years ago. Why were they in the middle of a cultural revolution? Why were they making?
Yeah.
When I was growing up, they were always saying, eat your vegetables. You're not like those people in China. They were always talking about the starving.
But
Yeah. Yeah, finish your point.
Oh.
But they were homogenous.
well, if that's true, have you ever been to Europe? I was in Europe 22 years ago. And I went to I was in France. And I went to the French-German border on a Sunday, and we crossed the border into Germany a pizza. Now, 75 years ago, could you have done that? So what, now, were the French some different color than the Germans?
Imagine. Like, I don't know, what's the argument or whatever. Like, these people are so similar, and they still find ways to make conflict.
Yeah, but my point is, it changed.
As much as possible.
But my point is that here you have two countries that were in conflict. No, well, these two countries were in conflict for hundreds of years. Oh, they work. There's no crossing guards or anything like that. They work together. So conflict is a result of oligarchy pitting groups against each other.
I keep on getting the pushback from you guys that conflict is like created by elites in order to
Yeah,
manipulate
it's
us.
British.
It is.
It's absolutely British.
Where these
The whole thing about survival of the fittest is a lie. There is no such thing as survival of the fittest. It's based upon
It was manufactured by the Roman Empire
manufactured.
and the followers.
Manufactured. The Roman Empire is the example. Okay, the United States was formed to destroy the Roman Empire. Okay, that's why we exist. Okay, the whole thing about survival of the fittest was designed based upon the system that operated in Britain. And, Charles Darwin, he applied that to the natural world. That's all fake. Yeah, that's not true. It's all fake. Survival of the fittest, everything about Charles Darwin is a hoax. And he applied the social method, organization, and the empire. He applied that to the natural world. And some people
that still bring out of the rest of the world at that point in time, and they think they were superior.
Well,
Could see how they would think that.
That was their policy.
Well,
Their policy was to keep the Chinamen down.
Right, that is.
Okay.
Or the
They
Indian.
keep the Indian down. Okay. And the United States was formed to destroy that system. And Franklin Roosevelt had to fight with Winston Churchill about this principle. It was right up there. It was right up there. In any case, the American system is based on the idea of to have the people, the source of wealth is people. If you create a credit system, you allow the people to, right, okay. The credit system allows the people to create the problem we have in the United States is that your whole life, and almost my whole life, we've been living in this situation where we didn't have a credit system, okay? In which, as people were saying, they're saying, well, if you want to go to the moon, we're going to have to cut the money out of
Get it from Social
taking care of the old
Security.
folks. We'll have to kill the old folks to go to the moon. Well, that's British. There's no reason. Because what?
No,
No.
the idea that we have to kill people to actually accomplish goals, that's a British.
We have all these people. This whole point is the people that are driving the cabs, if you drive a cab and you probably got a guy who's got a math, either physics or engineering is not driving the cab. Okay, if you take the credit, if you take the credit and you put it out there to do the things that need to be done, we have more than enough work for everybody that wants to work, and we're going to produce more than enough wealth to take care of everybody that needs to take care of, to pay off the debt in the past. The problem is we don't produce anything. Alexander Hamilton, it's called the American system. Alexander
It's
Hamilton.
the Apollo model.
Right.
We have it in our memory that the United States functions as a productive economy. And it's when we went away from that we become a financial bubble economy.
I just boiled all that down with one simple question. What's the LaRouche Act or LaRouche Committee? What's the stance on immigration?
Well, that was your question?
That should have been the question.
Well, I think we answered it. Look at me, all the people who answered this question in this room right now. I mean, this nation is a melting pot nation that's founded on the idea that everybody has to be able to improve and better their conditions of living. I mean, you have to think about it. All this stuff about, you know.
So everyone can improve and better their conditions of living by coming.
No.
No.
That's why I'm asking what's the position on immigration.
But
That's going to be the hard line where I walk out.
actually, I would love to know what your very heartfelt way, and people respect that. I think people are, I mean, that's
Yeah, because
energizing the
otherwise,
conversation.
my opinion is like,
So, well, thank you for coming tonight.
well, my,
He wants to say
Go ahead.
hello.
Just to get it out of this conversation,
appreciate it.
not that everybody direction. I mean, if you don't know it, most of it, I mean, it's simplified by the Belt and Road Initiative. No, it's delicate handling. Nations, however, nations have a mission. Around that mission, you can pull a country together. And if you collaborate among them around building a future for mankind, in very concrete terms, like the Belt and Road, and high-speed rail, all these things are now being built in Africa, Central Asia. And it's kind of saying, look, United States, if you want to collaborate with you, we can come together in third countries and collaborate with us, right? And we can help you in your country build trust, and retrain the workforce and so on. Then, in that context, you can bring all nations together.
Your point now is
And that goes back to your question about what's the strategy, the way that you can overcome this divide and conquer, divide and rule kind of game that's played otherwise. You know, on the part of the oligarchy, we just on the part of plain old people politicians. The way to overcome all that is you obviously have a program that unites people together around creating a future, right? As opposed to what do we have right now to fight over? How do we create a future where we're all going to be able to prosper?
Yeah, I think you answered my biggest concern is how do we circumvent this sort of diversity, conflict, trying to get everyone under the unified message. So then I guess the policy becomes how do we get somebody who's poor to care about that same sort of low time preference initiative of like energy. Whereas I don't really care about your fusion energy because I don't have a job. I live with my mom. I'm 30. I don't have a car. And
Because if they see
nice,
it's going
but,
to be essential for lifting people out of poverty, and it's not just some kind of like science proposal. I mean, this is the difference of what you're seeing right now. Going back to what Brian just said about you have now close to 80 nations, maybe somewhere more or less, who have joined the China Belt and Road Initiative. You know, places like Kenya, the Belton, called the New Silk Road or the Belton Road, yes, some people call it. Yeah, but you think about places such as in Kenya, in Nairobi, in various parts of the continent of Africa, and what China has committed to, not just for its own nation, but for what the president of China says.
Building that infrastructure
You know,
so they can extract those resources.
I knew you were going to say that. Why did I know you were going to say that?
It's obvious.
Well, I think they do more than the
They care about Africans as much as they
What do they have in Ethiopia?
Yeah. That's,
It's like, why did they could build the same kind of railroad? The point is, if you develop the interior country, you're going to open up potential there, not just extract resources. That's where new towns, food can grow. Those are going to be markets in the future for goods from the East Coast and vice versa, right? In other words, you can, you grow the pie. And China's, they're just thinking in terms of the future. They're saying, how do we grow the pie, as opposed to how do we get, we're already rich. Chinese can already say, in terms of their leadership, they say we're in the country, we're prosperous. They're looking at the future and saying, well, how do we have win-win in the future? How do we share the future, including global security? I mean, they don't want to.
and how do you eliminate poverty across the board? So if China can eliminate poverty of the last 3 decades, something like 700 million people living out of poverty, and it's rapidly increased in the last 5 years now. But really, it's commitment to a space program, science driver. To have that vision as a unified mission internationally with every single nation, to say, if the Chinese, the Americans, the Russians, leading nations work together and said, we all are going to make sure that if poverty is going to be eliminated from the planet as overall, then the key focus we have to have is to eliminate poverty in the most impoverished and desolate areas. Starting with the continent of Africa, starting with
India has higher rates of opification than most African countries.
Well, that's true too. That's why.
And they have, in most cases, 55% of the population is under the age of 25. This is the enormous productive potential of
The populations of that coming, India and Africa.
productive potential too.
Bangladesh has got as far as it's the most densely populated country in the world. In any country with more than 10 million people, Bangladesh has got, I think Bangladesh has got 106 million people in the state. The size of Bangladesh is the size of this country. And anyway, he was talking about China. China is building an immense port in Pakistan. So they're gonna produce a lot of their goods in Pakistan, and it will be much easier to ship everything to the Middle East. I don't know whether it is their design to extract resources in Pakistan. We see it as something very positive.
Yeah.
Building a port that's going to, a lot of small industries are going to be relocated in and around that port, and a lot of goods will be made, and they will be shipped Middle East, wherever. So it will bring jobs to that region of Pakistan and Pakistan.
Well, that's part of the Belt and Road Initiative. But if you want to think about resources, the most important resources, besides the human mind right now, is the helium-3 on the moon. So are we going to sit here and fight over little chunks of resources on Earth when we can get, if we get fusion, then 1 square mile of anywhere on Earth would produce all the minerals, all the metals, all the elements required for the entire world. So if you take 1 cubic mile of anywhere on Earth with the energy of a fusion power fusion force, you can separate the elements so that all the aluminum, all the iron, all the cobalt, what they're fighting for in Congo right now. The precious metals that go into your cell phone, all of those metals could be harvested in 1 square cubic mile of Earth if you have the energy to separate it. So instead of fighting for resources on Earth, and you see, the thing that you're not considering is that if geopolitics continues to rule with thermonuclear weapons, now the Russians have it, China, India, Pakistan, North Korea. If we continue to operate on geopolitics, we're going to use those weapons. Then we'll be fighting over the rubble.
Yes.
Whether or not nuclear weapons are actually like usable, or whether or not like it's just been.
Yeah.
I mean, they're essentially useless.
Well,
Well, I will ask people here. Your number.
Then our mind suffer on each person. They won't be.
that doesn't mean they won't.
It was.
Aren't there? We're good. Mike.